Hi everyone, my name's Matthew Mackenzie. We're back again, another book review. I'm sure this is all the stuff that you've been waiting for, and today we'll be reviewing Animal Farm. I'd be very surprised if older readers don't know this book. Animal Farm was written by famous author George Orwell, and I believe it was published, I think, in 1945. The novel Animal Farm is rich in symbolism and allegories, even though it was set on a farm with all these dancing and singing animals, which reflects, unfortunately, the events of the Russian Revolution. But we'll go more into that. But first, if you could introduce yourself, Stephen. Would you?
Hi, I'm Stephen Vizinczey. I wrote An Innocent Millionaire, 3 Wishes, in place of older women. And we are going to talk today about animal farms.
Great. And Claire, would you?
Hi, my name is Claire Parker. I'm a friend of Stephen's. I have written a series of fairy stories, and the first one is called Gossamer Island.
Brilliant. So let's get into this book anyway. I suppose it's a book anyone can read, to be honest, because I think George Orwell, what he wanted to do is, even for young people, is to recognize the situations people can end up in. I mean, he makes it look so friendly in some sense with animals. Everyone can sort of relate to animals, I suppose, in some sense. And what happens in that book regarding the animals. And I want to start with yourself, Claire. What do you think Animal Farm represents in its sort of main themes?
Oh, well, I think one of the main themes is the destructive power of corruption, especially in a government.
Yeah.
And how that affects an entire nation. It's about power in the wrong hands, and how that can get out of control. Yeah, that's the main theme.
Yeah, and there's a few others. I mean, obviously, George, the book was a severe criticism of the Russian Revolution, but he obviously had to sort of hide it in some sense with sort of signs and symbols, because, as I said, in 1945, after the war, it was a touchy issue. They were on the same side, Russia, UK, America, and for this book to come out, people didn't want it. They were very touchy about its criticism, but in some sense, it was foreshadowing what was happening, what could, and even then, I suppose in some sense, it was reflecting on the Russian Revolution of 1917. So it was sort of old news. I'm going to go to Stephen, because I think it's quite important, Stephen, because you were involved in some sense with revolutions. You yourself know about revolutions because you are a part of it. So yes. I'd like to get your view on the emphasis of this book, because I'm sure it would be quite a very important book when it comes to actually recognizing when you feel like the government in power is not sort of being fair to people's views on their life, liberty and choices in some sense.
Well, it's very interesting because although it's about animals and allegory, in effect every profound book about society gives you clues about whatever society you live in. And what I think you could, totalitarianism is not a big problem in England today. And, what corruption is, and basically if people have a chance to steal, they steal and abuse their power.
Yeah.
There is simply no honest power. Power corrupts. During the revolution, to give you one example from my own experience of the revolution. I was in the Hungarian Revolution, and we had a couple of days of freedom. And I went home and visited my mother. And during the stopping the fighting, but somebody sent of a a case of oranges. And I haven't seen oranges since 1945. And I was very much looking forward to have an orange. And when I asked the other people, the guy who wanted to be an editor, I asked him did he see the oranges? He didn't see them. And he wanted to be the editor because he had no other jobs. The rest of us were university students, and we didn't want a job. We just wanted to have the revolution. And so when there was a chop in the fighting, I asked the guy who elected himself the editor-in-chief that where are the oranges? He said, I didn't see any oranges. And then when there was some stop in the fighting, I happened to go into the room, and there he sat with a girl on his lap, and they were eating oranges. So basically, everybody makes, and this is true of Animal Farm, and Animal Farm which helps you to understand not just the Soviet Union, the past history, but understand how people, even the best,
the ones with the best intentions,
end up getting
corruption.
Corrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, I am afraid, if there is a chance to steal, they steal.
Mm.
And that's very true of politics.
Yeah, definitely.
And you watch BBC News, you see every other day somebody's complaining about a contract that the COVID epidemic is that to get a contract to make a medicine is already mild in corruption.
Yeah.
It is that's the great enemy of
any sort of form of government, and even below that.
Government is that there will never be there is no such thing as a good government.
Mm.
But as Churchill said, democracy is the worst possible system in the world, except all the others.
Mm.
And if you read Animal Farms, you will be able to understand better the real motives of people, that what else are thinking of when they talk of the public good.
Mm.
And they will find always some, you find the self-interest works.
Yeah.
Well, you can't help that. I mean, people are most interested in themselves and their families and so on. Mm. And so therefore corruption is incredible. Italy is a very good example of also where the family is sacred, and which makes the Italians' love of the family is so overpowering and so over every other kind of love and duty, that that's why the country is marred in complete corruption. We look at the European Union. You don't need to go back to the Soviet Union. Look at the European Union, which was built as a better united Europe and a better, juster world, and level playing field and so on. And look what happened to that.
Yeah.
It is animal farm, in fact, gives you insight into how any kind of government works.
I suppose, in a basic sense, because it's trying to make it as easy as possible, as simple as possible to say, don't fully trust your government. Don't, in order for a strong government, and I know there's one character in the book, I don't remember the character, he was very apathetic. Nothing can be done, this is the will of those who lead us, and whether we turn left or right, they still make up their decision. But the problem is, if you think that way, and you let those in power, take that inch, they could take that mile instead. And what I suppose what the book is trying to sort of get at is, no matter how bad things become, we are all part of the system, and by rights we should all have an interest and question the government and take action in doing so, not just use education. Don't think education alone is a way to hold government to account, but turn up to rallies, question things in a sense, hold them accountable. But in a sense, I do feel sad for the animals in Animal Farm, because it didn't start off as, these animals, the pigs would turn out the way they are. All the animals had a main enemy, which was the farmer. And once the farm was overthrown, it wasn't sort of known straight away how things would become. And this is the situation of all governments. I suppose you always have to do is look at your political history, and the government would have a common enemy. Again with Russia, the situation with the old guard, the old form, they weren't running things right. People were starving, and they could feel that the powerful were not running the country right. And eventually, after during the First World War, the disastrous policy, the disastrous attacks on Germany, this is when the Russian Revolution formed, because there was just too much bad decisions over many years, and it just culminated in this thing. But the idea now, while we're reviewing the book, is, I suppose, governments now don't always tend to behave, and you could count several governments. I shouldn't name any, to be fair, in case the video gets taken down. But straight away, and I suppose it links to human rights as well. Sometimes we have to make our voice clear when we see injustice, because you never know if people are apathetic and just sit by. Who's to say that another government is watching, saying, well, if that government can get away with it, why can't we? And Stephen is right. When it comes to gaining power, one of the quickest ways to do it is to be really deceptive and cruel to the people. I want to go, and this leads on to the next question. And I'm going to start with self-clear. Because of the corruption in the book, because of the misuse of power, could anything have been done to stop that misuse of power by the other animals in that book? What would, if you was one of the animals, Claire, what would you, if someone said, we're going to take away stuff from you, Claire, we're going to tell you this is what you need to do, you need to work in the farm all day, Claire, and not hardly pay you anything for it, and then lie to you about your freedom or liberty, what could you have done to stop it? What would you?
I'm not sure if anything that could be suggested would have been effective, but they could have tried to form some kind of group to protect themselves. I don't know, get together and make their opinions, voice their opinions, and say they will not put up with what's been imposed upon them, and see if that gets them anywhere. But I doubt if it would.
If you want to improve society, don't try to improve the whole of society and close a revolution or whatever. Try to improve a single thing. Maybe you can succeed in that. For instance, there were mining for shale oil in the shells in the deep down in the earth, and many communities got together and stopped it, and they were successful. They didn't transform the whole of society, but they deal with one single evil, and they managed to that single evil, that single ill thing, single unjust thing and destructive thing, lessen its impact. So this is the kind of way you can improve society.
Rather than try and create a utopia.
Correct.
Because the idea, I suppose, where...
Yeah, just a concrete aim which is achievable.
Yeah.
And
because it comes too complex, I suppose it relates to your book, The Rules of Chaos, in some sense, where things can become so chaotic that no one can really, it's not human, I suppose it's not human achievable to say, look, we stand up against these injustices, but then make a society utopia, because things just get so big, so out of hand. There's this illusion that when people feel they become powerful, or when they feel that society becomes powerful, that everything's going to be in a straight line and everything's going to be predictable, and everything is certain. But one thing we can be certain of is where there is an absolute power, there is going to be corruption, isn't there?
Not always. I'm just thinking that after the end of the war, the introduction of the national health system, that was a tremendous achievement of the government at the time, which benefited the whole of society,
and,
especially poor people.
it makes England a leading country in the world, really, because the National Health Service, again, it was one thing, National Health Service, and you could, there is nothing like it around the world.
Before the national health, you had to be, you needed to have enough money to pay for medical help.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have it, many poor people
well, good luck,
died.
isn't it?
You died.
You die, yeah.
It was terrible.
And there's still a lot of countries around the world that have that system. There was a lot of talk even in America,
Well, that's right.
with the Obamacare, and I know it's still controversial, but the idealism is free, or as low as you can in the cost, health service for all. It is a human right, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes.
And that makes sense, rather than people saying we're going to drive away all the ills and evils of this world in one go. And I'm talking about like the Hitlers and the Stalins, and because and the French Revolution, I suppose, things in the French Revolution can lead to some form of other evil, where people suffer. The term revolution eats its own children. I don't know if you've ever heard that term.
Anybody who wants to build an utopia is actually making society worse. Because ignoring human nature to start with, and all utopias ended up bringing a worse society than what they had.
And we should, I think, one of the things of this review is that's one, I suppose, one of the reasons why we want people to read this book, I suppose. I mean, if I start with yourself, Stephen, why should people read the book Animal Farm today? I mean, I know you've mentioned it in quite a few terms, but if you could sum that up for us, for the viewers, why should they read it? I mean, people could look at that book Animal Farm and think, oh, it's just about animals on a farm.
Every good novel about society, which whatever part of a social issue it looks at, animal farms structures a society, and the book, I mean, and through it you understand not just animal farms, but you understand something about the organizations of human societies everywhere. You know, this is really like if you learn about the circulation of the blood, for instance, although it was discovered hundreds of years ago, you really understand about your body a lot better, and any true observation around society, and the animal farm has several, helps you to understand the society you live in, because anything, human beings or allegorical animals, is when you read anything truthful, which explains or highlights some truth about human nature or how humans interact, helps you understand everything, everything better. So this is why it is not so much what the book is say about a particular subject, but whatever it says is truthful, then it's used for anything. It's just like if you read a novel, if you want to read about human beings, you don't necessarily have to read an English book. Indeed, you are better off if you read a French book. But it is, you understand more. Any truth about anything helps you understanding the world you live in and yourself.
So the idea is to read anything as you can, but at least to read
anything which makes sense.
Yeah, obviously there's stuff out there you don't want to read. A good thing is propaganda.
Yeah.
You know, avoid certain things. And you know, some of that thing was mentioned in the book anyway. The use of propaganda, as it was, you know, done in you know, during those revolutions.
Propaganda is ever present. You know, this is why newspapers have editorial meetings, what they highlight.
Yeah.
And that's already use management. What they want you to concentrate on.
Of course. So Claire, what I want you to do, I want you to read a part of the book where to whet people's appetites, I suppose. So if you could go ahead and do that.
Okay. I was just going to say, Animal Farm is a warning. Is a warning
Yeah.
to people about the danger of power in their own hands. Yeah. Out from the door of the farmhouse came a long file of pigs, all walking on their hind legs. Out came Napoleon himself, majestically upright, casting haughty glances from side to side, and with his dogs gambolling around him. He carried a whip in his trotter. There was a deadly silence. Amazed, terrified, huddling together, the animals watched the long line of pigs march slowly round the yard. It was as though the world had turned upside down. Then there came a moment when the first shock had worn off, and when, in spite of everything, in spite of the terror of the dogs and of their habit developed through long years of never complaining, never criticizing, no matter what happened, they might have uttered some word of protest. But just at that moment, as though at a signal, all of the sheep burst out into a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better. It went on for about 5 minutes without stopping, and by the time the sheep had quieted down, the chance to utter any protest had passed, for the pigs had marched back into the farmhouse.
What does that mean to you, Claire? What did you learn from that? Those marching pigs and the sheep. It's interesting it mentions sheep doing that.
Yeah, I suppose the representative of the populace, obedient and malleable in the hands of those who have taken power, overtaken.
Yeah.
Have taken the pigs are the dominant creatures, aren't they? They are the ones who tell them what to do. So it's.
I mean, when you think of pigs, you think of, and in I suppose political sayings, pigs snouting the trowel. Pigs represent greed.
That's right.
Pigs represent, disgust in some sense.
Filth, yes.
But they're clever animals, and
they're very clever. And apparently their physiognomy is very close to ours, to our human physical makeup.
Yeah.
The pig is the animal closest to the makeup of a human being. So there we are, we're kind of sub-pigs.
Oh, we've got to behave ourselves now, otherwise you never know what we might end up as. But anyway, I'm going to end this video here because I think this thing's, the memory card and this thing's getting full. I didn't realise. But we'll be back again with another book review. I'd like to say thanks for Stephen and Claire for actually reviewing this, this book. And we're not trying to get anyone to revolt nowadays. I'm just saying this is an important book because if you look on the sort of sad history of humans, of human beings, you want to avoid the situation where people suffer endlessly because they've not sort of questioned things and they think, utopia is the way forward. We need to sometimes question things, and especially when power is a concern. So we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
And we'll review another book.